The gate was already screaming when John Graves sprinted through it. He could hear the iron hinges tearing loose from the stone, a sound like the world cracking open, and the shouts of men behind him telling him to run faster, you fool. The whole arch is coming down. But John did not run faster, because he had dropped his satchel 3 feet back, and every herb, every compress, every vial of tincture he owned was scattered across the flagstones. And a man without his kit was not a field surgeon. He was just a man watching other men die. He grabbed the satchel. He grabbed the strap of the case with the bone saw. He grabbed the roll of linen bandage that had come free and was unspooling across the cobblestones like a long white ribbon. And then something enormous hit him from the left. Not a stone, not a beam. A body, a warm, solid, impossibly strong body, that hit him sideways with the force of a charging horse, drove him 2 full yards to the right, and slammed him into the old well housing just as the gate arch came down in a roar of cut stone and mortar dust that swallowed the whole passage in a gray-white cloud. John lay on his back with the wind knocked completely out of him, staring up at a sky he could barely see through the dust, and the first coherent thought he managed was that the crushing weight across his chest was not stone. It was a person. She lifted herself off him before he could speak, pushed up on her arms, shook dust from her hair, and looked down at him with eyes the color of old pine bark, dark green-brown, sharp, and completely unimpressed by the fact that she had just thrown herself across a human stranger to keep half a gatehouse from killing him. She was an orc woman, and she was looking at him the way you look at someone who has inconvenienced you by nearly dying. "Get up," she said. "The dust will settle in your lungs if you stay on the ground breathing it." John opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He started. "Got up," she said, already standing, already brushing mortar dust from her fitted leathers. Her outfit was warrior's gear, but cut in a way that was distinctly her own, a sleeveless jerkin of deep brown leather, laced tight along her sides, over a dark green undershirt with its sleeves rolled to the elbow. Her trousers were heavy canvas tucked into knee-high boots, and a wide belt sat low on her hips with an empty loop where a sword should have been. The sword was lying 6 feet away in the rubble, apparently having been thrown clear when she tackled him. She walked to it without hurrying, bent, picked it up, and sheathed it in a single motion so practiced it looked like breathing. John got up. His knees were shaking. His hands were steady, they were always steady, a thing he had trained into them through years of field surgery, but his knees were making a private disaster of it, and he chose to believe the orc woman did not notice. She noticed. He could tell by the slight angle of her jaw. "Your bag," she said, nodding at the satchel still clutched in his fist. "You went back for it." "I did," he said. The arch was coming down. The herbs in it would have taken me 3 weeks to replace. She looked at him for a moment. Then something shifted in her expression, not softening exactly, but recalibrating like a person who has formed an opinion and has just been given reason to revise it. "John Graves," he said, because it seemed like the right time to offer something. "Apothecary and field surgeon. I work out of the Stone Harbor Inn on the Trade Road. 3rd room on the left past the common room." She said nothing for a moment. "Yash," she said finally, "Stonefist. That's a name I should probably write down." "Why?" "Because you saved my life and I generally try to remember those." The crowd that had scattered when the gate came down was beginning to reform at the edges of the rubble field, the way people always do, first at a careful distance, then closer as the immediate danger passes, drawn in by the human need to witness, to assess, to gossip. John could see their faces. He could see the way they looked at Yash. He had lived his whole life on the trade road where the old war between humans and orcs was not quite memory and not quite over, and he recognized that look, the particular combination of gratitude delayed by fear that produced no thanks at all, only distance and whispers. Yash saw it too. She was very clearly used to it. She turned away from the crowd and walked toward the road that led south, toward the inn, without looking back. John picked up his scattered supplies, stuffed them into the satchel, and followed her. She did not invite him. He came anyway. She was walking toward the Stone Harbor Inn, and he needed to get back to the Stone Harbor Inn, and besides, it seemed deeply wrong to part from someone who had just cushioned your body with their own, and not at least offer them dinner. The Stone Harbor Inn sat at the crossing of the North-South Trade Road and the Old River Road, which meant it got everything: merchants, mercenaries, pilgrims, couriers, hired swords, refugee families, and enough passing gossip to fill a library. John had set up his apothecary room there 4 years ago, after the campaign in the Eastern Territories had ended, and he had decided he was done stitching wounds that were created on purpose by men with political ambitions. The innkeeper was a broad woman named Marta who had been running the place for 20 years and had the particular skill of treating everyone with identical courtesy, regardless of species, allegiance, or apparent danger, which is what made the Stone Harbor the place it was on the trade road. Marta had the kind of quality that no amount of politics could train out of her. "Gate collapsed," Yash said to Marta, stating it as a pure fact as she came through the door. "I can see the dust on you both," Marta said, not looking up from her ledger. "Rooms?" "She's with me," John said before he thought about it. Yash turned and looked at him. It was not a grateful look. It was an assessing look with a slight edge of warning. "I have a room," she said. "You do," Marta confirmed, still not looking up. "Number 7, been paid through the week." John cleared his throat. "Right then, dinner at least." Yash considered this for approximately 3 seconds. "Dinner," she agreed. That was the beginning. He brought her to the table in the corner of the common room that he used every evening, because it had its back to the wall and a clear line to the door, which was the only kind of table worth sitting at in a trade road inn. He spread his satchel on the bench beside him and began the ritual of checking his supplies while they waited for food, which was a habit he had not been able to break since the campaign inventory. After every incident, make sure you can close the next wound that opens. Yash watched him do this without comment. "You are very methodical," she said eventually. "People keep bleeding at inconvenient times," John said. "It helps to know what you have." "What do you know about orc physiology?" He looked up. "More than most human surgeons, less than I'd like. Specific: your clotting is faster than ours, roughly 3 times under normal conditions. Your pain tolerance is not actually higher, that is a human myth. Your pain response is different. You process it differently. You do not show it the way humans do, which people mistake for not feeling it." He paused. "Your bone structure around the orbital ridges is significantly denser, which means head wounds that would kill a human outright often don't kill orcs, but they can cause a different kind of damage in the inner ear that goes undiagnosed because nobody is looking for it." Yash was quiet. "Where did you learn that?" she said. It was not quite a question. "Campaign, Eastern Territories, 4 years ago." He put the last vial back in the satchel. "I worked a field hospital at the Thornwall Crossing for 8 months. We had orc prisoners of war brought in for treatment." He held her gaze. "I treated them the same as I treated everyone else." Something shifted in her expression again, deeper this time. "The Thornwall Crossing," she said. "You know it." "I was on the other side of it," she said. "The food arrived and saved them from whatever the next moment was going to be." Marta's boy set down 2 bowls of the inn's perpetual stew, thick with root vegetables and salt pork, and a board of bread, and Yash ate with the straightforward efficiency of someone who has eaten many meals in many unfamiliar places and has long since decided that performing discomfort about it serves no purpose. The common room filled up around them as the evening wore on. Merchants in from the northern passes, a pair of couriers with sealed pouches at their belts, a noisy table of hired swords who were celebrating something or mourning something. It was hard to tell the difference after the 3rd round of drinks. And across the room, a man who had been watching Yash since she walked in. John noticed him the way he noticed everything, peripherally, without making it obvious. The man was tall, well-dressed in the traveling clothes of someone with money, with dark hair worn swept back and the kind of face that had been handsome long enough to become accustomed to its own power. He wore a signet ring on his right hand. He was watching Yash with an expression that John did not like at all, not the ordinary wary hostility that humans directed at orcs, but something more calculating, something that knew her. John did not say anything about this yet. "You said you were staying through the week," he said instead. "I have business in Stone Harbor," Yash said. "What kind of business brings a warrior through a gate that is apparently not structurally sound?" Her jaw did the angling thing again, the one that meant she was deciding how much to say. "Trade business," she said. "You don't look like a merchant." "People rarely look like what they are." He absorbed that. "Fair point." "I look like a man who spilled a tincture of valerian on his left sleeve sometime this morning, which I did. But I also look like exactly what I am, which is an underpaid apothecary with too many books and not enough shelf space." The corner of her mouth moved. Just barely, but it moved. "You have books," she said. "About 30, which is 15 too many for the space I have. The medical texts are mostly useful. The 2 histories are embarrassing to admit I enjoy. There is one philosophical treatise someone left in payment for a tincture 2 years ago that I keep meaning to read and keep using as a doorstop." "Which history?" she said. "Veth's account of the border wars and Callum Ash's record of the Orc clan migrations after the Second Treaty." He watched her face. "I know which one is more accurate." "Ash," she said. "Ash," he agreed. The man across the room stood up. John tracked the motion without turning his head. He walked toward them with the practiced ease of someone who expected to be welcomed, and he sat down in the empty chair at their table without being invited, which told John a great deal about him in approximately 2 seconds. "Yash," the man said. Just the name, familiar and possessive. Yash set down her spoon. Her hands were very still. "Carrick," she said. The name came out flat and even, which in John's clinical experience meant either indifference or the controlled surface of something that was not indifference at all. "I have been looking for you for 3 weeks, Carrick said. He had not looked at John once. "I have not been lost," Yash said. "The council sent me." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Yash, what you're carrying cannot be in human territory, you know that." John picked up his bread and tore it with the deliberate attention of a man who is absolutely not listening. "I am managing it," Yash said. "The agreement expires in 6 days. If you don't present the treaty seal to Warchief Borum by then." "I said," Yash said with a quiet precision that stopped him mid-sentence like a wall, "I am managing it." Carrick finally looked at John. The assessment was quick and complete and contemptuous. "Is this one a problem?" he said to Yash as though John were a piece of furniture. "No," Yash said. "You are." Carrick stood. He smoothed his jacket in a careful, controlled way. 6 days, Yash. The alliance goes cold without the seal. Think about what that means." He gave John one more glance, the kind of glance you give something small, and walked back across the room. John finished his bread. "You do not have to pretend you did not hear that," Yash said. "I heard most of it," he admitted. "I don't know what it means." She was quiet for a moment, then, "It is complicated. Most things worth knowing are." She looked at him with those pine bark eyes, and John had the distinct and unsettling sensation of being seen more clearly than he generally liked to be. "You are very calm," she said. "I spent years in a field hospital. After a while, complicated situations stop frightening me. They just become problems to solve. And what if the problem is too large to solve? I've never met one," he said, "though I've met several that were too large to solve alone." She said nothing to that, but she did not look away. They sat in the corner of the common room until Marta's boy began banking the fire, which was the Stone Harbor's signal that the evening was winding down. Around them, the merchant tables broke up. The couriers retired with their pouches, and the table of hired swords descended into the kind of low, companionable murmur that replaces the earlier noise. Carrick had left an hour ago. John had tracked him to the door. "Thank you for dinner," Yash said, standing. "You saved my life this afternoon," John said. "It seemed like the minimum courtesy." "You do not owe me anything for that." "I know, I didn't say I was paying a debt. I said it was courtesy." He met her eyes. "There's a difference." She held his gaze for a moment, and then she did something he was not expecting. She put out her hand. not in the human handshake fashion but with her palm turned upward, a gesture he recognized from Ash's histories as an orc custom of acknowledgement. Not quite a bow, not quite a pledge, something between the two. He placed his hand in hers, and she closed her fingers around it once briefly and let go. "Good night, John Graves," she said. "Good night, Yash Stonefist," he said. He lay awake that night with the smell of mortar dust still in the back of his throat, thinking about treaty seals and warchiefs and alliance countdowns, and a woman who had put her body between him and a falling gate without a moment's hesitation, and then informed him to get off the ground before the dust settled in his lungs. He was already gone, he just didn't know it yet. The next morning he left his door open, which he never did, and arranged his workspace so that he was facing it, which he also never did. He generally faced the window when he was compounding because the light was better. She did not come that morning. He told himself he was not waiting. He was absolutely waiting. She came in the afternoon when he was midway through grinding a batch of dried willow bark. She knocked on the open door, which he found oddly formal given that it was open, and when he looked up, she was leaning against the doorframe with her arms crossed and her sword at her hip, and the afternoon light was hitting her from the side in a way that made the planes of her face look like something someone had carved carefully and with intention. "You know about orc physiology," she said, without preamble. "I do," he said. "I have a bruise on my left ribs that I cannot evaluate without a mirror." He gestured at the examination stool beside the table. "Sit." She came in. She sat. She pulled the hem of her green undershirt up on the left side, and John Graves, who had been a field surgeon for 8 years and had long since separated the clinical from the personal in a professional context, had a brief and entirely human moment of noticing that Yash Stonefist was built the way that legends were built, all lean power and careful strength, with a jaw set that said she would rather die than admit the bruise was hurting. He picked up his examination lamp and looked. "That is a significant bruise," he said. "I know it's a significant bruise. Is anything cracked?" He pressed along the rib line with practiced fingers, watching her face rather than his hands because her face would tell him more. "Breathe in," he said. She breathed in steadily, no hitch. "Out, smooth." He pressed more firmly at the point of deepest discoloration, and she did not flinch, but her jaw muscle moved. "You have at least one cracked rib," he said. "Possibly 2. Not broken clean through, but cracked. You are going to feel this for 6 weeks minimum, and you need to bind it or it will worsen." "Can you bind it?" she said. "Yes." He got the linen. He worked quickly and efficiently, which was the only way he knew how to work, and he wrapped her ribs with the practiced tightness that was firm enough to support without restricting breath, and the whole time she sat completely still and looked at the wall with an expression of thorough neutrality. "You got this tackling me," he said. "I got this from the gate rubble, yes. And you just walked around with it all evening and all night." It was not immediately relevant. He tied off the binding and stood back. "You can put your shirt down." She did. "Yash," he said. She looked at him. "Thank you," he said, "for the gate. I said it last night, but I want to say it properly. You broke ribs for me. I was a stranger. You did not have to do that." "No," she said. "Then why?" She was quiet for a moment. "Then you went back for the bag while the arch was coming down." She said it like it explained everything, and he could see that for her it did. A man who goes back for the tools he uses to help people while a gate is falling on him is worth going back for. John sat on the edge of the examination table and looked at her. She was looking at him with the direct, measuring quality that he was coming to understand was simply how she moved through the world. She did not look past things or around them. She looked at them. It was an unusual way to be looked at. "What is in the treaty seal?" he said. "You don't have to tell me, but I am trying to understand the situation you are in, and I think I could be useful, and I would like to be useful." She studied him for a long moment. "The seal is a physical object," she said finally. "A carved ironwood disc with the marks of 4 orc clans and the human governor of the Eastern March. It was made 6 years ago when the border wars ended formally. The treaty it represents gives the 4 clans protected trade rights in human territories for a 10-year period. It prevents the clans from being legally pushed off the road, from being taxed at punishing rates, from being arrested without cause at border crossings. She paused. It is essentially the document that keeps 4,000 orc people safe inside human land. And you are carrying it, he said. The seal must be presented to War Chief Boram at his encampment in 6 days, 5 now, to renew the treaty for a second term. It is a formal renewal ceremony. If it does not happen, the treaty expires and the protections lapse. Carrick, John said. Carrick is the council's courier. He was supposed to be the one carrying the seal. She said it very evenly. He was delayed in the northern passes. He sent word to the council that the seal had been stolen. The council sent me to find it. And did you find it? She reached inside her jerkin and took out a flat, circular disc of carved ironwood, maybe 4 inches across, strung on a length of dark cord. The carving on its face was intricate and deep-cut, 4 clan marks surrounding a central knot that John recognized from Callum Ash's book as the formal symbol of the Eastern March Treaty. I found it, she said, in Carrick's own bags, buried under a false bottom. John was very still. He hid his own treaty seal, he said. Or someone paid him to lose it, she said. There are interests, merchant interests, land interests that would benefit from the protections lapsing. If the treaty expires, orc traders can be pushed off the road. Orc families with settled businesses in Eastern March territories can be legally dispossessed. Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it, a controlled heat. It would be very profitable for the right people. So Carrick is either corrupt or being coerced. Or both, she said. And he knows you have it. He knows I have it. John looked at the disc in her hand. He looked at the door. He looked back at her. He was watching you all evening, he said. I know. Is he alone? No, he has 2 men he has been traveling with. They stay at the North Inn in Stone Harbor, not here. She put the seal back inside her jerkin. He will not move openly, not in a public place with witnesses. It would draw too much attention. But 5 nights on a road is a lot of opportunity, John said. Yes, he made a decision. It was the kind of decision he tended to make quickly, without excessive deliberation, which had served him well in field surgery and occasionally gotten him into trouble everywhere else. Stay here, he said. She looked at him with an expression that said very clearly that she had not been taking direction from anyone for a very long time. Not a command, he said immediately. An invitation. This room has a lock. I have a cot in the back. I've slept there when patients need overnight watching. If you sleep in room 7, you are alone and accessible. If you sleep here, you are in a room that looks occupied by the inn's apothecary, which is both less interesting to Carrick and significantly less alone. She said nothing for a long moment. The cot, she said. The cot, he confirmed. She nodded once. That afternoon, Carrick came to the apothecary room. He did not knock. He opened the door and stepped in and stood in the center of the room with the composed entitlement of someone who was used to making entrances. And John, who was sitting at his work table with a mortar and pestle and his back very deliberately to the door, allowed about 4 seconds to pass before he turned. Help you, John said. I want to know what she has told you, Carrick said. The woman from dinner last night. Don't play the fool. John set down the pestle. I'm a traveling apothecary at a trade road inn. She was a customer seeking treatment for bruised ribs. We shared a meal because she saved my life at the gate yesterday. He held Carrick's gaze with the complete and unhurried steadiness that he had developed during the campaign, when panic in a surgeon was contagious and steadiness was the most valuable tool in the room. I don't know what you think is happening here, but I treated a patient and made a friend. That's the whole of it. Carrick studied him with flat, clever eyes. She is carrying something that belongs to the council, he said. She has taken it without authorization. I am here to retrieve it on the council's behalf. Then your argument is with her, not with me, John said pleasantly. My argument, Carrick said, moving to the door, is with whoever stands in my way. He left. John waited until the footsteps faded down the corridor, then let out a slow, careful breath. He went to find Yash. She was not in the room. She was downstairs in the common room at the corner table, eating an apple with a knife in a way that was somehow both casual and communicative to anyone paying attention. John sat across from her. "Carrick came to see me," he said quietly. "I know, I saw him go in." She sliced another section. "What did he say?" "That you took the seal without authorization." The knife paused for a half-second and resumed. "And what do you think?" "I think," John said, "that a woman who went back into a collapsing gate district to retrieve a treaty seal that a corrupt courier deliberately buried in order to protect 4,000 people is not the one operating without authorization." He met her eyes. "But I think you should tell me if I'm wrong." She looked at him. The knife stopped moving. "You are not wrong," she said. "Then we have 5 days to get you and that seal to Warchief Barham's encampment, past a man with 2 hired men and unclear intentions, on a road that is going to get increasingly exposed the further north we go." He folded his hands on the table. "I know the road north. I travel it 3 times a year for supply runs. I know where the waypoints are, which stretches are exposed and which inns are trustworthy." "You are volunteering," she said. She said it slowly, as though she was testing the shape of the idea. "I'm volunteering." "Why?" He thought about it honestly before he answered. "Because she was the kind of person that an honest answer was owed to." "Because you put your body between me and a gate and then told me to get off the ground before the dust got in my lungs," he said. "And because what you are doing matters. And because," he paused and decided to say the true thing, "because I have been a useful person in rooms full of broken strangers for a long time, and I would very much like to be useful to a specific person who is not a stranger just this once." The apple sat uneaten on the table between them. Yash said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "You would be in danger. I'm a field surgeon. I'm frequently in danger. This is specific danger directed at me. I'm aware of the distinction." She looked at him with those direct, measuring eyes for a long time. "You are a very strange human," she said at last. "I've been told." "All right," she said. "We leave at dawn, before Carrick is awake." "I'll have the supply horse packed by first light," he said. She extended her hand across the table, palm up again, the orc gesture of acknowledgement. He put his hand in hers. This time she did not let go immediately. They left before the sky was fully light, John's supply horse loaded with his medical case and a week's rations, Yash moving beside him with the quiet economy of someone who knew how to travel without announcing it. The north road out of Stone Harbor was still gray and empty, the morning birds just starting in the hedgerows, and for the first quarter-mile they did not speak because there was nothing that needed saying yet. Then Yash said, "Tell me about the campaign." It was an invitation to something real, not small talk. He knew the difference. He told her. He told her about the field hospital at Thornwall, the pace of it, the particular exhaustion of triage, of having to decide very quickly who could be saved with the resources at hand and who could not. He told her about treating the orc prisoners. He told her about Surgeon Commander Halves, who had taught him everything and died of fever 2 weeks before the armistice. He told her about the moment he knew he was done with military surgery, which was not a dramatic moment at all. It was a Tuesday morning when he set a splint on a 17-year-old boy's broken wrist and realized the boy should never have been there, and neither should he. Yash listened without interrupting, which was itself a kind of gift. "And after the campaign," she said when he stopped. 3 months on the road, working inns and market towns. "Then I found Stone Harbor and Marta had a spare room and the trade road needed an apothecary more than it needed another hired sword, so," he shrugged. 4 years. "You like it," she said. Not a question. "I like being useful to people who chose to come to me," he said. "That is different from the campaign. It matters." She nodded. He asked her. She told him. Not everything, not at once, but pieces, offered the way she offered things directly, without embellishment, as though the fact of the thing was sufficient. She was from Clan Stonefist in the northern foothills. Warchief Barham was her uncle by blood, which was why the council had sent her to find the seal. She could be trusted with the renewal in a way that mattered formally, as a clan member rather than an outsider courier. She had been a warrior since she was 19. She was 26 now. She had fought in 2 border skirmishes and 1 trade route ambush, and she had been to the human settlements in the Eastern March more times than most orcs, which gave her a different understanding of the human world than most of her clan had. Different how? John asked. Most orcs see humans the way most humans see orcs, she said. The version built from fear and rumor. I see the version built from contact. She glanced at him sideways. It is better mostly and worse sometimes. More complicated always. That sounds like people, John said. Yes, she said, exactly like people. By midday they had covered good ground on the road north, and they stopped at a waypoint spring to rest the horse and eat. John sat on a stone with bread and dried meat, and watched Yash move around the clearing with the automatic vigilance of someone who checked their surroundings by instinct, not anxiety. Carrick will know we left, he said. Yes. He will also know the road. She came and sat beside him, not across from him, beside him, close enough that he was aware of the warmth of her. He will not try anything on the open road. There are too many travelers. He will wait for a narrow section. The pass at Breek is 3 days north. It is the obvious place. The Breek Pass is 5 miles of single-track trail, John confirmed. If he gets ahead of us, he could hold the far end. Then we need to be at the Breek Pass before he is, she said. If we push through the night we can. No. You cannot push through the night safely with a loaded horse on road you cannot see. She said it without condescension, as simple fact. We camp at the Coldwater waypoint tonight. We move early tomorrow. We make the Breek entrance by midday, which is 3 hours ahead of where Carrick can place himself if he leaves Stone Harbor at dawn. John looked at her. You've been thinking about this since last night, he said. Since Carrick walked into your room, she said. He absorbed this. All right, Coldwater tonight, Breek by midday. She tore a piece from his bread, not asking, just taking, with the comfortable directness that he was coming to find entirely characteristic of her, and ate it while watching the road north. He did not mind her taking his bread at all. He minded considerably less than he might have expected. The thing about traveling close together for a full day and into an evening was that it created its own kind of intimacy that had nothing to do with romance, and everything to do with the simple fact of being known. By the time they reached Coldwater waypoint, a stone shelter with a fire ring and a water source, used by road travelers since before either of them was born, John Graves knew how Yash moved when she was worried versus when she was simply watchful. He knew she ate her bread last and her meat first. He knew she had a habit, when thinking, of pressing 2 fingers lightly against the back of her left hand. He knew she was funnier than she let on, in a dry, sidelong way that caught you off guard. And she, he suspected, had catalogued rather more of him than he was entirely aware of. They built the fire together without discussing who would do what. He fed the horse and she gathered kindling, and they ended up sitting on opposite sides of the fire in the way of people who are both too aware of each other and too sensible to acknowledge it yet. Tell me about the seal carving, John said. I recognize the clan marks from Ash's histories, but the central knot, I didn't know that one. She reached inside her jerkin and took out the disc, turned it in the firelight. It is the thorn by knot, she said. Old treaty symbol, older than the border wars. It means, she paused, searching for the translation, approximately, that what is bound here cannot be undone by the absence of either party. The binding continues even if those who made it are gone. That's a lovely concept, John said. She looked up at him from across the fire. It is, she said, and her voice was different, quieter, warmer, without the professional evenness. The fire crackled between them and neither of them spoke for a moment, and John felt the particular gravity of a moment that is tipping towards something, and he was, for the first time in a long time, not entirely sure he wanted to step back from it. Yash put the seal away. She stretched out on her bedroll with her sword within arm's reach, and John on his side of the fire arranged his coat under his head and watched the stars come out through the gaps in the shelter roof. John, she said. Yes. You snore, she said. I am warning you in advance. I do not snore, he said with dignity. You did last night in the apothecary room. I could hear it through the door. That, he said, was the night wind. It was not the night wind. "Good night, Yash," she laughed. It was the first time he had heard her laugh, and it was low and genuine and surprised-sounding, like she had not planned it. And John lay on his back grinning at the stone ceiling of the waypoint shelter, with his heart doing something complicated that he had absolutely no intention of examining right now. The second day on the road brought harder going. The track steepened as it approached the Breek Hills, and the spring mud in the lower sections slowed the horse to a careful walk. But the sky was clear, and the road was populated enough with other travelers that the exposed stretches felt safer than the map suggested they would, and by late morning John and Yash came around a long bend and saw the entrance to the Breek Pass open up ahead, a narrow throat of land between two rock shoulders that the old road threaded like a needle through stone. Yash stopped. John stopped beside her. She was looking at the pass entrance, and her expression had gone to the flat, controlled stillness that he recognized as her reading a situation she did not like. "What?" he said. "There are riders at the entrance," she said. He looked. There were. Two men on horseback, positioned on the road's right side with the deliberate placement of people who are not simply resting. "Carrick's men," she said. "He got ahead of us. He must have left last night, faster horses." She scanned the rock faces on either side of the pass. "And I would estimate Carrick himself is somewhere in there, waiting for us to commit to the entrance before his men move up behind." The classic pincer. Front and back, no room to move in the narrow pass. "Can you go around the hills?" John asked. "The detour adds 2 days. We don't have 2 days." John looked at the two men at the entrance. He looked at his supply horse, which had a medical case on it. "Yash, let me go first," he said. She turned to look at him. "I'm an apothecary on a supply run," he said. "I go ahead alone. I'm not interesting to them. You follow 50 paces back. If I can get the entrance men talking and position them the wrong way, you can get through the gap before they can close on you. And if you cannot, then I will have gathered useful information about their intentions from a very close range," he said dryly. "John," she said his name with a particular weight. "If Carrick is in there, I know what I'm doing." He held her gaze. "I was in a field hospital. I dealt with men who had weapons and fear and not enough information every single day. I know how to talk to people in difficult situations." She looked at him for a long moment. 50 paces, she said. 50 paces. He took the horse forward, and he did it the way he had learned to approach difficult men, without hurry, without visible wariness, with the dull, practical air of someone whose business is entirely mundane, and who finds the whole setup a mild inconvenience rather than a threat. The two men at the entrance watched him come. "Morning," John said, pulling up beside them. "Is there a hold on the pass? My supply schedule is already a day behind." The nearer man, broad-shouldered with the flat eyes of a professional, said nothing, just looked past John at the road behind him. "Waiting for someone?" John said. "Move through," the man said. "Gladly." John nudged the horse forward into the pass. He did not rush. He let the horse set its own pace. And he watched the rock walls and the narrow sky above and counted his heartbeats. And at the third bend in the pass, he found Carrick standing in the middle of the track with his signet ring catching the light and an expression of cold annoyance. "Where is she?" Carrick said. "I'm alone," John said. "You left Stone Harbor together. My man at the market saw you. We traveled together for a day and separated at Coldwater Waypoint." John shrugged. "She said she had another route." Carrick studied him. "You are very calm for a man with an uncertain future." "I'm a surgeon," John said. "I've watched men die from fear. I stopped doing it years ago." He could see, past Carrick's shoulder, the far end of the Breek Pass, the opening of it, the road widening out beyond the rock throat into the open hill country that led north. If Yash was 50 paces behind him, and both of Carrick's men were at the near entrance, and Carrick himself was here at the midpoint, "I'll ask you to step aside," John said pleasantly. "I have a supply deadline." "Where is the seal?" Carrick said. "I don't know what I am not a fool," Carrick said, and something changed in his face, the composed surface cracking, the real feeling beneath it showing. And the real feeling was not cold calculation, John realized. It was fear. The man was afraid. If that seal reaches Boram, there are people who will be very unhappy with me. Very powerful people. I need that seal to not arrive. Do you understand me? This is not political posturing. This is survival. John understood something else entirely. Someone has leverage over you, he said. Carrick's jaw tightened. You're being coerced, John said. You didn't hide the seal for profit. Someone threatened you. Someone told you to make it disappear or they would do something to you or to someone you care about. Carrick said nothing, which was its own answer. Then we can resolve this, John said, because what you need is not the seal. What you need is whatever is being used against you to not work anymore. The sound of Carrick's men moving came from behind John, boots on stone, the near entrance, approaching the midpoint of the pass. And then from the far end, the sound of running, not panicked running, but the deliberate, fast, purposeful run of a warrior who has assessed the terrain and committed to a line. Yash came through the pass at the far end like something elemental. She had not gone 50 paces behind. She had gone wide, up the rocky hillside, and come down on the far side of the pass entrance, bypassing Carrick's entrance men entirely. She was running down the center of the pass track now, sword not drawn. She had made a calculation about that, John could see, not wanting to escalate to actual violence, and she covered the distance between the far entrance and Carrick's position in the time it took Carrick's men to close from behind. She stopped between John and Carrick. Yash, Carrick said. I heard what you said, she told him. Voice was even, but her eyes were very intent on his face. Who has leverage over you? Carrick said nothing. Is it merchant factor Thresh? She said. He has been buying land options in the Eastern March for 2 years. If the treaty lapses and orc traders are pushed off the road, his land value doubles. Something moved through Carrick's face. He has my brother, Carrick said. The words came out stripped of everything but the fact. My younger brother works for Thresh's trading house. He is being held. I was told if the seal arrives at Boram's camp, my brother pays for it. The silence in the pass was complete. John watched Yash's face. He watched her absorb this, not with the cold, strategic calculation he might have expected, but with something genuine. She looked at Carrick the way John looked at a patient whose pain he had just correctly diagnosed, with the particular quality of attention that comes from finally understanding what is actually wrong. Then you need to come with us, she said. To Boram's camp, with your testimony. Carrick stared at her. My brother, Warchief Boram, has reach into every trading house in the Eastern March, she said. He has had it for 6 years because of this treaty. If you testify before him formally about what Thresh has done, the kidnapping, the coercion, Boram can move against Thresh in ways that protect your brother. Without the treaty, no one has that reach. Without the treaty, your brother stays where he is and the seal disappears and Thresh wins and the 4 clans lose their protections and nothing is better for anyone except the man who kidnapped your family. Carrick was silent. Come with us, Yash said. Bring your men. Testify at Boram's camp. That is the only version of this that ends with your brother safe. John watched Carrick. He watched the man make the calculation, the real one, not the strategic one. The one that happened in the chest rather than the head. All right, Carrick said, very quietly. The journey from the Break Pass to Warchief Boram's encampment took 2 more days, and they covered it as a strange company, Yash and John, Carrick and his 2 men, navigating the oddness of traveling together after having been, very recently, on opposite sides of a problem. Carrick's men remained watchful, but they were professional enough to follow their employer's direction. And by the end of the first day, the tension had settled into something functional if not warm. John found himself beside Carrick for part of the second morning, the 2 of them walking while Yash ranged ahead with one of the hired men checking the road. She trusted you quickly, Carrick said, not accusingly, observationally. She trusted me specifically, John said. There's a difference. What did you do to earn it? John thought about it. Nothing dramatic. I treated her ribs. I told her the truth when I had the option of being vague. I did not pretend the danger was smaller than it was. He paused. I think she is tired of people minimizing things. Carrick was quiet for a moment. She was always like that, he said, even in council meetings. She would not let anyone be comfortable with a comfortable lie. It made her unpopular and right in equal measure. How long have you known her? 4 years. She was liaison to the council from Clan Stonefist. He glanced sideways at John. She never trusted any of us the way she seems to trust you, and she has known you for days. 3, John said. Carrick made a sound that was not quite a laugh. What are you to her? He said. John considered the question. He considered it honestly, which was harder than considering it strategically. Right now I am a field surgeon traveling north on a road he knows well, he said. What I might be after that, he watched Yash's shape ahead on the road, the way she moved, the particular quality of her attention. I think that depends on things that have not been decided yet. Carrick nodded slowly. She deserves someone who answers questions like that, he said, instead of like a politician. That afternoon, when the road widened through a stretch of open meadow and Carrick's men fell back to make camp, Yash dropped back to walk beside John with the natural ease of someone who has decided the distance between them should be smaller. Carrick told me about his brother this morning, John said. In more detail. The boy is 19. 3 months apprenticeship into Thresh's trading house before this started. I know, Yash said. He told me the same. What you did back there in the past, John said. Seeing past the surface of the problem to what was actually driving it, you did the same thing, she said. You saw it before I did, you said it before I did. You were the one who offered the solution. We both saw it, she said firmly. That is what matters. He looked at her. She was looking ahead at the road. Yash, he said. Yes. I am going to say something that I may be overreading the situation with. She turned and looked at him. I think, he said, that what is happening between you and me is not standard traveling companion territory. She said nothing for a moment. No, she said, it is not. The word settled between them with the weight of something agreed upon like a treaty of its own. I don't know the Orc customs around this, he said. I know Ash's written account, but that is not the same as knowing what is appropriate to say to a specific person. She stopped walking. He stopped beside her. The meadow was wide and quiet around them, the afternoon light gold and flat, and she turned to face him fully in a way that she had not done before, not the measuring, assessing gaze, but something open, a thing that required something from her to offer and was being offered anyway. In my clan, she said, when you intend something, you say it plainly, without decorating it. The plain version is more respectful than the decorated one. All right, he said. Then plainly, I am not done wanting to know you after this road ends. I want there to be road after this one. She held his gaze. Her hands were at her sides, very still. Plainly, she said, I decided at the Coldwater waypoint that I wanted that. I have been waiting to see if you would come to the same conclusion without being pushed. You could have told me. I wanted to know if you would get there yourself, she said. You did. Was the waiting annoying? The corner of her mouth moved. A little. He took a step toward her. She did not step back. He put out his hand, palm up, the way she had done twice, and she looked at it for a moment with those dark pine bark eyes, and then she placed her hand in his and stepped the rest of the way close and kissed him. It was not a tentative kiss. It was the kind of kiss that a person who does not do things halfway gives when they have decided they are going to do something. Direct and certain and warm, with the particular intensity of something that has been waiting to happen and is now unambiguously happening. He put his free hand at her jaw because that was where it wanted to go, and she did not object at all. And the meadow was wide and quiet, and the light was gold, and everything else was very far away. When she pulled back, she was looking at him with an expression he had not seen before, open, genuinely open, with no layer of assessment over it, just the plain fact of it. That, she said, is what I meant about plain. I have absolutely no objection to plain, he said. She laughed, the real laugh, the surprised one. And John Graves stood in a meadow 2 days south of a warchief's encampment, holding the hand of a woman who could have walked past him in a collapsing gate district, and had instead thrown herself across him and cracked 2 ribs and gone directly on with it. And he thought, here is the specific thing I did not know I was missing, and now I will spend a great deal of time making sure it stays. War Chief Boram's encampment was large by any measure. A city of hide tents and pole pavilions sprawled across the wide northern meadowlands below the foothills, with cook fires and horse lines, and the kind of purposeful movement that meant an organized clan in full functioning order. John had never been to an orc encampment. He had read about them. He had treated orc warriors in a human field hospital. He had not been inside one as a guest. He felt the weight of attention as they came in through the perimeter, not hostile, but assessing. Eyes moving across the strange company of Yash Stonefist and a human man and a human courier and 2 hired swords, all arriving on the road with 2 days to spare before a treaty deadline. He kept his expression neutral and his shoulders easy and did not look away from the eyes that found him, which was the same thing he had done when he arrived at new postings during the campaign, acknowledge the scrutiny without performing either discomfort or false ease. Yash's hand was not in his. She had released it when they came in view of the perimeter. Not with embarrassment, she had released it with the calm practicality of someone who understood that some things are introduced in their own order and the wrong order costs everyone something. He respected that. He had also noticed it, and the noticing was not nothing. Boram himself was the kind of man-orc, who was not large in the way his reputation suggested, but was instead dense with a quality that was harder to name, something like absolute situational certainty, the look of a person who has been making high-stakes decisions for long enough that the weight of them has been converted into ballast rather than burden. He received Yash with the particular formality of family in a formal context, and she returned it precisely, and John stood at a respectful distance and watched the ritual of it with genuine interest. The seal was presented. The document was verified. The formal renewal ceremony was brief and specific and took about 20 minutes, and when it was done, Boram looked at John for the first time with the direct attention of a man taking a full measure. "You came with her from Stone Harbor," he said. His trade-speak was fluent and accented in a way John found entirely pleasing to listen to. "I know the road north," John said, "and she was good enough company to make the journey worth the detour." Boram's mouth moved slightly. He looked at Yash. Yash was looking at the fire ring, which told John she was aware of exactly what her uncle was doing. "The courier," Boram said, turning to Carrick, "will testify about merchant factor Thresh." "He will," Carrick said, quietly but steadily. "Good." Boram looked back at John. "You stay tonight. My people will want to ask a human surgeon questions." "I would be delighted," John said, and meant it. The situation with Thresh and Carrick's brother resolved with a speed that surprised John, and apparently did not surprise Yash at all. Boram moved through the treaty framework like a man who had spent 6 years building exactly this kind of tool, and had been waiting for an occasion to demonstrate its edge. Within 2 days of Carrick's formal testimony, a messenger with the war chief's seal and a council counterpart's signature was on its way to the Eastern March governor's office with a formal complaint of coercion and unlawful detention against Thresh's trading house. The brother was released within a week. John spent 3 days at the encampment. He treated 12 patients in that time, mostly minor ailments, and a pair of injuries from training sparring. He answered questions about his methods and about orc physiology as he understood it, and about what the campaign had been like from the inside of a field hospital. He learned things in return, from a clan healer named Vrek who was formidably knowledgeable about plant medicines from the northern foothills and who gave John 3 dried specimens and a description of their preparation that went directly into his notes. And in the evenings he sat with Yash, by a fire outside the perimeter, and they talked. They talked the way people talk when they have passed the stage of figuring out whether they are going to talk at all and arrived at the stage where talking is simply what you do because you would rather spend your words on this specific person than on silence. She told him about the foothills in spring, the way the clan moved to higher pastures, the particular quality of the light there in the early mornings. He told her about Surgeon Commander Halves, properly, not the compressed version, all the real details. The man's utter inability to eat anything without getting it on his coat, his inexhaustible patience with terrified young medical officers, the way he had died in an entirely undramatic way of ordinary fever, which had seemed then and still seemed like the wrong ending for a man that good. "Tell me about him more," Yash said. And he did. And when he was done, she said quietly, "He sounds like the kind of person who makes other people more themselves." "He did," John said. "Yes. You are like that," she said. "You make the people around you more themselves." He looked at her. "You made Carrick more himself in the past," she said. "You made me," she stopped. "More yourself," he said. "More willing to be," she said. It was as close to vulnerable as he had seen her, that admission, and he understood what it cost from someone as privately guarded as she was. He reached over and took her hand the way she had done with him, palm up, the orc gesture, and she turned her hand over in his and threaded her fingers between his, which was not the orc custom. That was just the two of them making their own language, and it seemed entirely right. "Yash," he said. "Yes. When this is done, when the treaty is settled and Thresh is dealt with, and you are no longer urgently required in the northern foothills, would you come back to the Stone Harbor Inn?" She looked at him. "You want me to come back? I want you to come back and stay. In the room next door, if that is what you want. In the back of my apothecary room on the cot, if that is what you want. I want you to come back and let me cook you bad stew and lend you one of my 30 books and argue with you about whether you snore." "I do not snore," she said with dignity. "You absolutely snore," he said. "I could hear you through the door at the waypoint." She laughed. Then she was not laughing. Then she was looking at him with an expression he was learning to recognize as the one she wore when she was about to do something she had decided fully to do. "Yes," she said. "I will come back." He put his free hand against her jaw, the way he had in the meadow, and kissed her. And she made a sound against his mouth that was not quite words and not quite anything else, just warmth, just the sound of someone who has arrived at a place they did not know they were going and found it exactly right. They sat by the fire until the wood burned down to coals. There is, in any situation with stakes as high as a formal trade road treaty, always the moment when the abstract becomes concrete, and people who have been maneuvering at a distance are required to be in the same room and face each other directly. That moment came 3 days after the encampment, when Boram's formal complaint reached the Eastern March governor and the governor, a cautious man named Aldrich, who had built his career on careful neutrality, and found himself holding a paper that required him to stop being neutral, called a formal hearing at the trade road station of Greypost, which was conveniently midway between the encampment and Stone Harbor. John had not planned to attend. He was an apothecary. The hearing was for council members, clan representatives, and the governor's own officials. He had no standing, but Yash asked him to come, and standing was not the same as being there, and he came. Greypost Station House was a long building with stone walls and a central hall that served, on occasions like this, as a formal meeting room. The governor's table was at one end. The clan representative, Yash, who had accepted the formal role, sat at the other. Carrick, as the testifying courier, sat to one side. John stood near the back wall with his satchel, which he had brought because he was a field surgeon, and standing near a thing with his satchel was the most natural position he knew. The hearing proceeded. Carrick testified. Documents were produced. The formal seal was presented and confirmed. An official from the governor's office who had been on Thresh's payroll became noticeably pale as the evidence accumulated and was escorted out of the room by 2 of Boram's men before he could do anything that would later complicate things. And then Thresh's advocate arrived. He was a thin man named Gorel, with a practiced voice and a prepared speech, and the speech was essentially this: whatever the formal merits of the treaty, the governor's authority to enforce it within his own territory was contestable, and the representative of the orc clans whose legal standing in a human hearing was, Gorel suggested with great smoothness, inherently uncertain, could not be the only voice to. "She has legal standing under the treaty she is here to renew," John said from the back wall. Gorel turned. He looked at John with the expression of a man identifying an insect. "I beg your pardon," he said. Article 3 of the treaty, the Thornbind Article, gives formal legal standing to any duly appointed clan representative in treaty-related hearings within the Eastern March, John said. Yash Stonefist is a duly appointed representative of Clan Stonefist and therefore of the Four-Clan Council. Her legal standing is not contestable within the specific scope of this hearing. It was agreed to by your client's own employer when the governor signed the treaty 6 years ago. Silence. John had read Callum Ash's account of the Eastern March Treaty 3 times. He had a very good memory. He held Gorrell's gaze with complete and unhurried steadiness. Gorrell turned back to the governor. "This man has no standing. He cited the treaty correctly," said one of the governor's officials, checking a copy of the document in front of him. "Article 3, she is the representative. She has standing." Yash, from her position across the room, was looking at John with an expression he had never seen on her face before. Something that was pride and something that was heat and something that was entirely beyond category. A look that made him feel seen from the inside out by someone who knew exactly what she was looking at. The hearing concluded 2 hours later with the treaty renewed. The complaint against Thresh formally entered into the governor's record, and the official who had been on Thresh's payroll being dealt with through processes that were appropriate and that John did not particularly need to follow in detail. Gorrell left. The governor signed the papers. Boram's men began rolling up documents, and in the station house corridor, as people streamed out into the afternoon, Thresh himself appeared. He had come with Gorrell, had stayed back while his advocate handled things, presumably, and he was not the figure John had imagined from the context of his actions, not large or impressive, just a solid man in expensive clothes with the particular tight expression of someone who has gambled a great deal on an outcome that has not arrived. He saw Yash in the corridor. "You have made," he said, very quietly, "an enemy today." Yash looked at him with absolute and complete composure. "You made yourself an enemy of 4 clans and the Eastern March when you coerced a courier and kidnapped a boy," she said. "I simply finished the documentation." Thresh looked at John. The calculation in his gaze was ugly, the look of a man who uses other people's attachments as leverage. "You," he said to John, "should know the company you are keeping will cost you." John had heard many variations of this threat in many forms over the course of his life and career, threats whose force depended on the threatened person agreeing that the thing they cared about was a liability rather than a value. He was, in this particular moment, absolutely done with that species of threat. "The company I am keeping," John said, "is the most impressive person I've met in 4 years of living on this road, and whatever it costs, I'll spend it." Thresh stared at him. Yash was looking at John with that look again, the inside-out look, the one without category. Thresh left. The corridor was empty except for the two of them and the sound of the station house settling into afternoon quiet. "The company I am keeping," Yash said. "I meant it." "I know you meant it," she said. "That is why I am looking at you the way I am." "How are you looking at me?" She stepped forward and closed the remaining distance between them, and put her hands on either side of his face, which, given that she was slightly taller than him, meant that she was tilting his face up very slightly, and she looked at him from a few inches away with the direct, open, no assessment layer gaze. "Like this," she said, and kissed him in the middle of the corridor of the Grapos station house, with the afternoon light coming through the slit windows and the whole complicated business of treaties and testimony and corruption behind them, and the road south ahead of them, and the Stone Harbor Inn at the end of it. He kissed her back with both hands at her waist, and the particular conviction of a man who has decided that this is exactly where he belongs. They came back to Stone Harbor 5 days after they had left it, which is not a long time, objectively, and is somehow simultaneously forever and no time at all when measured in the specific unit of having your life's gravity rearranged. Marta looked up from her ledger when they came through the door. She took in John with his satchel. She took in Yash at his side with her dust-covered leathers and her sword at her hip, and the particular quality of someone who has come back to a place and is deciding to stay. "Treaty sorted," Marta said, which told John something about how much of the Stone Harbor's business she was generally aware of. "Treaty sorted," Yash said. "Room 7 is still yours through the end of the week," Marta said. "I can extend." "She can have the month if she wants it," John said. Marta made a note in her ledger. "2 for dinner," she said. "Every night," John said. Marta made another note. Her mouth did not move, but her eyes did briefly, with the expression of someone who has seen a great many things pass through their inn and is not surprised by this one and is also, quietly, quite glad of it. John and Yash took their corner table, the one with its back to the wall and the clear line to the door. He set his satchel on the bench. She set her sword against the wall, within arm's reach. Marta's boy brought stew without being asked, and the fire was going, and the common room was filling up with the evening crowd of merchants and couriers and travelers who would carry their secrets and their gossip through the Stone Harbor in the morning. "Article 3, Yash said into her stew. "You read it," John said. "I have read the whole treaty 7 times, she said. "I know Article 3. I wasn't sure you had time to look at my face when I cited it." "I had time," she said. "I have very good peripheral attention." He ate his bread. "Yash," he said. "The apothecary room," he said. "I have been using the back cot genuinely as a cot for overnight patient watch, but it is not a very comfortable cot. And you have been sleeping in room 7, which I understand is a perfectly adequate room. But I want to say plainly," he paused, gave her the word back the way she had given it to him, "that I would very much prefer it if you slept somewhere close enough that I could hear you snoring through the door." Yash set down her spoon. "I do not snore," she said. "We have strong conflicting evidence on this point. Your evidence is a single anecdote from a waypoint shelter with wind in the rocks. My evidence is 3 nights of she kissed him. In the middle of the common room of the Stone Harbor Inn, with Marta's boy frozen at the edge of the room holding a bread board and 3 merchants at the next table going abruptly silent, and the fire crackling and the whole ordinary extraordinary apparatus of a trade road and going on around them. She kissed him with the same directness she brought to everything decided, certain, undecorated, the plain version that was more respectful than the decorated one. He kissed her back. He brought his hand up to her jaw. She made the same sound she had made at the fire in the encampment, the not-quite-words warmth sound. When she pulled back, the common room had the particular charged quality of a room in which something real has just happened in public. The 3 merchants were studying their food. Marta's boy had set the breadboard down carefully and retreated to the kitchen. One of the hired swords at the far end was grinning. Yash looked at John. "I still do not snore," she said. "You absolutely do," he said. "I am completely in love with you and you absolutely snore." The words landed in the space between them, with a weight he had not planned and did not regret. He watched her face process them, the plain version, no decoration, and watched something settle in her expression like a foundation going in, something that would hold weight. "I love you," she said, in the same plain, direct way as though it were a fact she was stating because it was true and true things were worth saying. "I know," he said. "You threw yourself across me in a gate collapse before you knew my name. I did the math." She laughed, and it filled the corner table and the warm radius around it. The days that followed were the ordinary, extraordinary days of 2 people who have arrived at each other and are beginning the work of building something out of that arrival. John's apothecary room expanded, in the specific way of a space that has adjusted to 2 people using it. A second cup on the work table, her sword belt hanging on the peg that used to hold his spare coat, the philosophical treatise that had been his doorstop replaced by a boot, hers, more effective, while she read the treatise itself on the cot in the evenings, occasionally reading passages aloud with a dry commentary that was better than anything the philosopher had written. She had moved into room 7 properly, which was 3 feet from the apothecary room, which she spent most of her time in anyway, which meant that the distinction between room 7 and the apothecary room was essentially administrative. John did not complain about this. She learned his routines, the morning inventory check, the particular way he organized his vials by use case rather than alphabetically, the fact that he talked to himself while compounding, not out loud but in a low murmur that was essentially audible only if you were in the same room. She did not tell him about the murmur. She found it one of the most endearing things she had ever encountered, privately, and kept this information to herself on the grounds that she did not want him to stop. He learned hers, the morning sparring practice she did in the yard behind the inn, early, before the other guests were up, the way she held her knife when she was eating alone versus eating in company, which were different, the particular quality of silence she had when she was processing something difficult versus something pleasant versus something she was preparing to argue about. He loved all three of these silences. He had told her this. She had looked at him with the inside-out look and said nothing, which was a fourth kind of silence he also loved. 2 weeks after they returned to Stone Harbor, Carrick came through. He came alone this time, no hired men, on a road horse that had clearly been ridden steadily. He came into the common room in the evening and found them at the corner table, which was now entirely understood by Marta and her staff to be their corner table, and he sat down across from them with the look of someone who has resolved something and come to say so. "My brother is home," he said. "I'm glad," Yash said. "Thresh's trading house is under a formal review by the governor's office. His land options in the Eastern March have been frozen pending investigation." He set his hands on the table. "I came to say I was wrong. What I did, hiding the seal, even under coercion, it was wrong and it could have caused—" He stopped. "I know what it could have caused," Yash said, "and I know what you were facing. Both can be true." He looked at her. "You are very difficult to remain an adversary of," he said. "I know," she said. He looked at John. Something passed between them, not warmth exactly, but the specific mutual acknowledgement of two men who have been on opposite sides of the same woman's situation and have ended up, somewhat improbably, in agreement. "She chose well," Carrick said, and John was not entirely sure whether he was complimenting Yash's judgment or expressing approval, and decided it probably did not matter. Carrick stayed for dinner and left in the morning, and John watched him go from the window of the apothecary room with Yash standing behind him, close, one hand resting against his back in the absent-minded way of someone for whom proximity to this specific person has become a physical default. "What are you thinking?" she said. "That the road is more interesting than it used to be," he said. She pressed her hand flat against his back for a moment, warm through his shirt. "Yes," she said, "it is." There was the matter, which John had turned over in his mind and not addressed, of the orc courtship custom he knew from reading and had not yet brought up, which was the custom of what Callum Ash's histories called the claiming acknowledgement, the public, explicit declaration of intent that in orc tradition preceded the formal bond. It was not the same as a human engagement announcement. It was more immediate than that, and less ceremonial, and more serious in a way that was specifically about the private commitment rather than the public display. He had thought about it for 3 weeks. He had done additional reading, cross-referencing Ash with Vreck's oral explanations at the encampment, which he had written down in his notes. He had arrived at a reasonably confident understanding of the custom. He had not brought it up because he was not sure it was his place to initiate a custom that was hers, and he did not want to get it wrong. He eventually got this wrong in the opposite direction, which was by not bringing it up long enough that Yash brought it up herself. She did this on an evening when the inn was full, and the common room was noisy, and they were in the apothecary room, she on the cot with the treatise, him at the work table, in a silence that was the pleasant kind. "You know about the acknowledgement custom," she said. He looked up. "Ash's histories," he said, "and Vreck." "And Vreck," he confirmed. She set the treatise down. She looked at him with a direct gaze. "You have been thinking about it," she said. "I have been thinking about whether it was my place to bring it up or yours," he said honestly. She looked at him for a moment. "In the old tradition," she said, "it is initiated by whoever is certain first." He was quiet. "Who was certain first?" he said. "I was," she said immediately, "at the Coldwater waypoint." He got up from the work table and crossed the room and sat on the edge of the cot, close, and looked at her. "Then tell me what the acknowledgement is," he said. "Not from Ash, from you." She was very still. "It is saying I have decided on you," she said, "not as a declaration for other people, as a fact between us. I have decided on you and I am not undeciding." "Yash," he said. "Yes. I have decided on you," he said, plainly, without decoration. "I decided somewhere between the gate collapse and the meadow, and I have not undecided and I am not going to." She put her hand on the side of his face, not the way she had kissed him before, but something quieter, a touch that was its own kind of language. "Then it is acknowledged," she said, very softly, "between us." He turned his face into her hand, and whatever the next moment was, it was entirely theirs. The evening outside was loud with traveling merchants and fire and gossip, and all the ordinary commerce of the Stone Harbor Inn on the trade road. And inside the apothecary room, it was warm and quiet and smelled of dried willow bark and lamp oil. And John Graves sat on the edge of a cot that had started as a patient watch bed and had become something else entirely. And Yash Stonefist sat across from him with her hand against his face and the treatise abandoned beside her, and the acknowledgement was made. Between them, in the plain, direct way that was worth more than any ceremony. Outside the room, the Stone Harbor went on. Inside it, something was beginning properly, fully, without conditions. The kind of thing that continues even if those who made it are gone, the thorn-bind kind. The binding that holds. The road north still ran through the Break Pass. The treaty still had 9 years on its term. The Eastern March was quieter than it had been in a decade, which meant the Stone Harbor's custom had shifted: fewer armed men, more traders, more families, more of the ordinary commerce of a world that was tentatively figuring out how to be less at war with itself. John's apothecary room saw more patients than it had before the journey north, because somewhere along the way his reputation had crossed over from decent traveling surgeon to the man who knows orc physiology and does not flinch, which meant that orc traders on the road began coming to the Stone Harbor specifically, which meant the inn itself became known as a crossing point where the old hostilities were slightly less present than elsewhere. Marta had expanded the corner table. She had done it without comment, simply had the furniture rearranged one morning so that the corner table could seat 4 instead of 2, because more and more often John and Yash shared it with travelers who had come to them specifically for medical consultation, for road information, for the particular quality of the Stone Harbor common room that was different from other places on the road. Yash had, in the months since the treaty journey, become a liaison of a different kind, not the formal clan council kind, but the practical road kind, the kind that gets built by reputation and demonstrated reliability. She knew the northern clans. She knew the road. She knew the treaty article by article. People asked her things and she told them the true version and did not charge for it, which turned out to be rarer and more valuable than she had expected. And John stitched wounds and compounded medicines and told patients true things about their own bodies without minimizing, which was his version of the same quality. They were, without having planned it, building something that had the shape of a practice and the feeling of a home and the specific texture of 2 people who have found the exact right person and are doing the work of growing into what that means. He loved her in the mornings when she came back from sparring with sweat in her hair, and a critical assessment of her own footwork that she shared with him over breakfast whether he had asked or not. He loved her in the evenings when she read aloud from the treatise in the deadpan tone she used for passages she found particularly absurd. He loved her in the middle of the night when the inn was quiet and he could hear faintly, through the wall from room 7, the sound that was definitely not snoring and that he would go to his grave insisting was snoring, on principle. She loved him in the ways she did not say but showed. The extra cup of tea she made every morning, exact temperature, set at his elbow without comment. The way she repositioned herself in any room to have a clear line to any door that John was near, without thinking about it. The fact that she had read, over the course of their months at the Stone Harbor, all 30 of his books, including the philosophical treatise, which she had mixed feelings about, and returned them each with a specific opinion delivered directly. She loved him by choosing him daily, in the continuous quiet way of a person for whom the choice has been made and made finally, and is therefore not a question anymore but simply a fact of orientation, the way the north is north. In the early spring, when the road opened from winter and the first heavy trade caravans came through heading north, a merchant's wagon threw a wheel at the Stone Harbor's gate. The new gate, rebuilt after the old arch collapse, solid dressed stone with iron banding. And in the commotion of the stuck wagon, a man came in on foot who turned out to be from Clan Stonefist's hill country, sent by Yash's people with a message. The message was an invitation. Warchief Boram was holding a spring gathering, the first in 3 years, at the clan's upper meadow camp, all of Clan Stonefist, family. Yash brought the message to John in the apothecary room and sat across from him with it in her hand and said nothing for a moment. "You are wondering whether to ask me to come," he said. "I am wondering whether you would want to," she said. "Yes," he said immediately. "It is several days' travel. I know the road north. The spring roads are Yash." She stopped. "I want to come," he said. "I want to meet your family. I want to see the foothills in spring. I want to hear about the clan migrations from people who lived them rather than from Callum Ash." He held her gaze. "And I want to do all of that at your side specifically." She folded the message. She looked at him with the inside-out look, the one that saw him specifically, not the version of him that was useful or capable or knowledgeable, but the person underneath all of that. The man who had gone back for his bag in a collapsing gate, who had talked to Carrick in a rock pass with real compassion, who murmured to himself when he was compounding and read histories for pleasure and had 30 books he could not fit on his shelves. "All right," she said. "We leave in 3 days." "I'll have the horse packed by first light," he said. And she smiled at him, fully, openly, the way she had been smiling more and more, as though she had spent the months at the Stone Harbor slowly and deliberately dismantling the practiced neutral surface that the world had taught her was necessary, and finding that the person underneath it was safer here than she had expected. The spring road north was better than the autumn one, drier and bright, with the thaw water running in the ditches and the first green coming up along the verges, and the sky the particular washed blue that follows a long winter. They talked the whole way, 4 days of talking, the continuous conversation of two people who have been having a long conversation for months, and find the thread always available, always interesting. He told her things he had not told anyone about the year after the campaign when he had been on the road alone, and the loneliness had been a physical thing, a weight he carried with his satchel. About the 2 friends he had made in the field hospital and lost in the aftermath, one to fever, one to a decision to return home that was the right decision for that person and had still been a loss. About the specific color of the feeling when he had met her, not at the gate but later, across the dinner table, when she had said Article 3, and he had known she had read the whole treaty 7 times, and something had clicked into place in his chest like a lock being aligned. She told him things he had not known, about the border skirmish she had been in at 22, the one that had gone wrong and cost her clan 3 warriors, and the specific way she had changed afterward, not harder, but more careful, in the way that meant more aware of what could be lost. About the reason she had become the liaison to the Human Council, which was not political calculation, but because she had grown up watching the way distance and fear built walls between species that served no one, and she had decided very young that she would rather be the person who walked through those walls than the person who stood behind them. She told him on the 3rd night, camped by a hill spring with the stars very bright, and the horses settled for the night, that she had not expected this. "Expected what?" he said. "You," she said. "This." She gestured at the fire, at him, at the road and the stars and the whole accumulated fact of the last 6 months. I had decided some time ago that my life was going to be a particular shape, useful, purposeful, solitary mostly. I had decided I was comfortable with that. Were you? He said. She was quiet for a moment. No, she said, but I was good at maintaining the appearance of it, which is different and which I had confused for a long time with the real thing. He sat across the fire from her and watched the way the light moved on her face. You are not solitary now, he said. No, she said. I am not. Is that good? She said before he could finish. Yes, that is the word you were going to use, and it is accurate, it is good. She said it with the plain directness that was her mode, and underneath it was everything she did not say because some things were too large for the plain version and were held instead in the space between words. He knew how to hear that space. He had been learning it for 6 months. The spring gathering at Clan Stonefist's Upper Meadow camp was everything Yash had described and several things she had not. The upper meadows were wide and green under a blue sky. The hide tents and open pavilions spread across them in the organized pattern of a people who had made this camp for generations. And the spring itself was in the air, in the food being prepared over open fires, in the music that was already going from somewhere in the camp's center, in the noise and energy of a large family reunion in good weather. Yash walked into it with her head up and her shoulders easy and her hand, after a moment's hesitation at the perimeter, in John's. He felt the attention. He was used to it by now, the specific quality of being a human in an orc space, which was the mirror image of the attention Yash drew in human spaces, and which he now understood from the inside in a way he could not have from the outside. He kept his head up and his shoulders easy, and did not look away from the eyes that found him. Borem was there, and greeted him with the formality of a second meeting that had had time to account for the information the first meeting had generated. He asked John questions about his work that were specific and genuinely interested, and John answered them the same way, and there was in the exchange the quality of two people who have concluded that the other is worth talking to seriously. Yash's mother was there. Her name was Grath, and she was a compact, sharp-eyed woman whose assessment of John was conducted entirely in silence over the first 10 minutes and seemed to reach a provisional conclusion by the end of the first meal. He eats everything, Grath observed to Yash in the clan language, which she apparently did not know John had a limited working knowledge of from Ash's glossary. He is polite, Yash said. He carries the healer's bag everywhere, Grath said. He is always useful, Yash said. He keeps looking at you, Grath said. He does that, Yash said, and her voice had in it something warm and private that she did not try to neutralize. John ate his food and pretended he had understood none of this and privately felt a warmth in his chest that was not entirely from the fire. The gathering lasted 3 days. John spent part of each day with the clan's healer, a different one from Vrek, an older woman named Dar who had been doing plant medicine in the foothills for 40 years, and who had opinions about Valyrian that John found genuinely illuminating and wrote 3 pages of notes about. He spent the evenings with Yash and Grath and various cousins and members of the wider clan circle, which had the specific feeling of being let inside a thing that had previously been visible only from the outside. On the last night of the gathering, there was a fire at the camp's center, a larger one, and music, and the specific quality of a celebration that is also a remembrance of everyone who is not there. Yash stood at the fire's edge and looked at the people around it, her family, her clan, the things she had been representing and protecting and working for, and John stood beside her and looked at her face in the firelight. "You love this," he said. "Yes," she said. "Even the parts that are difficult." "Especially the parts that are difficult," she said. "The difficult parts are why it matters." He took her hand. She leaned against him slightly, just the particular lean of someone who has decided that the person beside them is a reliable thing to lean against, which is different from leaning on them and more intimate for being smaller. Grath, across the fire, watched this with an expression that was the orc version of relief and approval combined, and said nothing, because some things do not need to be said. They came back to the stone harbor in the early weeks of the second spring since the gate collapse, which is not a long time in any cosmic sense, and is, in the specific human and orc sense of time lived rather than time counted, a very great deal of time indeed. The inn was as they had left it. Marta had the corner table as they had left it. The apothecary room had the smell of dried herbs and lamp oil, and the particular combination of their two people's presences that had worked itself into the room over months, until it was as much a part of it as the walls. Yash hung her sword belt on the peg. John set down his satchel. They stood in the middle of the apothecary room in the late afternoon light, and the world outside was full of the usual trade road commerce, and the room was quiet. "We are back," Yash said. "We are back," he said. She looked at him with the open gaze, the one without the assessment layer. "John," she said. "Yes. I am not going anywhere," she said. "This is what I am saying, in the plain version, I am not going anywhere." He crossed the room and put his arms around her, and she put her arms around him, and they stood in the warm, late afternoon apothecary room of the Stone Harbor Inn at the crossing of the North-South Trade Road and the Old River Road, and it was not a dramatic moment, and it did not need to be. It was the specific moment of two people who have arrived, finally, at the same place, and are standing in it together, and are not going anywhere. In the weeks after, the Stone Harbor settled into what it would be, the particular version of itself that these two people, in these two roles, in this corner table and this apothecary room, made of it. Merchants came through with sore backs and market disputes. Couriers came through with sealed pouches and sore feet, both of which John could address. Orc traders on the road north stopped specifically, some of them, because they had heard there was a place on the trade road where the old hostilities were slightly less heavy, and the healer was reliable, and the woman at the corner table knew the treaty article by article and would tell you the truth about your rights on the road. It was a small thing, on the scale of the world. It was not small to the people it helped. John treated every patient the same. He told them the true thing about their condition without minimizing. He referred the ones who needed more than he could provide to the appropriate next person on the road. He kept his inventory current because people kept bleeding at inconvenient times, and it helped to know what you had. Yash was at the corner table most mornings when the common room was at its busiest, and she was not officially doing anything, but she was there, and people who needed the kind of knowledge she had found their way to her, and she told them what she knew and did not charge for it, and the effect of this over time was not something that could be measured in a ledger but was entirely real. In the evenings they sat together and talked and read, and sometimes did not do either because neither was necessary. He had stopped being a solitary person. She had stopped maintaining the appearance of comfort with solitude. What they had built in the 6 months since a gate arch came down on a flagstone road was not a monument and not a ceremony. It was a practice, a daily thing, the continuous act of choosing each other in the quiet and the difficult and the ordinary. There was no ceremony at the Stone Harbor. There did not need to be. The acknowledgment had been made between them in the plain way in the apothecary room. That was the binding. That was the thornbind kind, the kind that holds even when the people who made it are changed by time, the kind that does not depend on absence or distance to prove it. What it depended on was this: two people in a room or on a road or at a table, choosing each other again in the small ways and in the large, not because they had no other options, but because they had looked clearly at all the options and come back each time to this one. The choosing was the thing. It always had been. And outside the Stone Harbor Inn, on the trade road at the crossing of the North-South and the Old River Road, the gate arch stood solid and new-dressed in its repaired stone, the iron banding tight and clean, the lintel unmarked. John sometimes stopped beside it when he was coming or going and looked at it. He thought about the sound it had made coming down. He thought about what had hit him from the left, not a stone, not a beam, a body warm, solid, impossibly strong and driven him clear. He thought about her voice after. Get up. The dust will settle in your lungs if you stay on the ground breathing it. He thought about a woman who had looked at a stranger going back for his bag in a collapsing gate, and decided, in the 3 seconds she had before the arch came down, that a man like that was worth going back for. And he had the thought he had on that first evening in the common room, sitting across from her with bread and stew and 30 unresolved complications on the table between them. The thought he had not let himself say plainly until the meadow, until the fire, until the apothecary room in the late afternoon. That specific thing I did not know I was missing. Here. Staying. He went back inside. She was at the corner table with a cup of tea and a merchant who needed help understanding his road rights under the treaty's 3rd article, and she was telling him in the direct, plain, no-decoration way, and the merchant was nodding and writing things down, and when John came in she glanced up. Just for a moment. Just long enough. The inside-out look. He sat down across from her and put his satchel on the bench and waited, because the merchant was still talking, and the tea was still hot, and the common room of the Stone Harbor Inn was doing what it always did, which was going on, and somewhere in the going on, 2 people at a corner table had stopped being separate things that the road had happened to bring together, and had become something with its own center of gravity. The merchant finished his questions and left with his notes and his treaty knowledge, and Marta's boy brought stew without being asked, and the afternoon settled into evening the way it did every day, gold to gray to firelight. Yash pushed the 2nd cup of tea toward John. Exact temperature. He picked it up. She was already looking at the door, always the clear line, but her hand, resting on the table, was open. Turned up, palm up, the orc gesture, but relaxed this time, easy, as natural as breathing. He set his hand in hers. She closed her fingers. Neither of them said anything because nothing needed saying, and the fire was warm and the road went on and they stayed.